Hello and welcome to this week's Query of the Week. So this week's query arose when we were working with a client firm preparing them for an upcoming monitoring visit. As we were reviewing their client list and the audits that they had, and we'd reviewed a number of files, at the end of the day it came up in our sort of open forum session as we were creating an action plan for them to get ready for their visit. And the query was this: what are the considerations of auditors and accountants when it comes to property management companies and whether they're compliant from a health and safety and building regulation perspective when either we're preparing financial statements for accounts report sign-off or for audit reports? Now, when we dug into the question, it stems from a report that was recently issued by Keenan Property Management. And KPM decided to undertake a survey in the aftermath of the June 2017 Grenfell Tower fire disaster in order to assess whether residents' concerns over fire and safety in their homes were being met or not. Now, 71 people were killed in that Grenfell fire tragedy, and thankfully we haven't had that type of a scenario here in Ireland in terms of a mass fire like that. But we have had tragedies, and we have had significant concerns you've seen in recent years where properties have been shut down because they're non-compliant. Now, KPM survey, they manage in the region of 60 blocks or in the region of 20,000 apartments, and they believe that there are fire safety issues in at least 70 to 80% of those housing units. That's a stifling result. So when the accountant asked us, they said, okay, I've got property management companies, I've got some blocks here. What are my considerations and what's my exposure? Well, the first place that we always go to when answering a question is we go and look at the relevant underlying legislation. So in this instance, there is, obviously, if we're doing an audit, there's the auditing standards, but the underlying legislation really is the Multi-Unit Development Act 2011, and also we would feel Companies Act 2014. If we're doing an audit, well, ISA 250 brings into consideration the relevant laws and regulations, given that a multi-unit development company is pretty much set up under the auspices of the Multi-Unit Development Act, and for the purposes of management of the common areas, well, obviously ISA 250 creates a significant focus within the audit on the issue. MUD Act 2011, that's a key impact. And in the scenario that the accountant presented, it's not just about the MUD Act and health and safety, it's actually to do with the sinking fund provision. So if there are health and safety issues, it is incumbent on the directors, or if there's remedial works to be done, it is incumbent on the directors to ensure there's adequate provision made in the sinking fund. And from an accountant or an auditor's perspective, they have to consider the adequacy of the sinking fund. And that the financial statements, it complies with the prevailing financial reporting standard being applied. And you see, we've been raising this issue for years, and now it is unfortunately coming home to roost. It's not just about health and safety. When you look at apartment blocks, the financial statements now are a key consideration because the sinking fund is housed in there. But will a buyer buy an apartment block, or buy an apartment in a block where there's an inadequate sinking fund? And I know this is the director's responsibility to assess the requirements, but based on the KPM report, we clearly have issues here. And then you see, this now is where we jump into company law, because under Part 4 of the Companies Act in relation to governance, and Part 5 of the Companies Act in relation to directors' duties. Are the board of directors meeting their requirements from a governance perspective? Are they complying with their directors' duties? For example, with the issues raised by KPM, are the directors meeting the requirement of their fiduciary duties? Are they acting in the best interest of the company? If KPM are identifying all these deficiencies, like the accountant or the auditor, well, forming an audit opinion obviously has a higher bar, as the auditor has to apply the auditing standards. And as I said, ISA 250 comes into play. But irrespective, for compilation engagements, the signing accountant should only allow their name be associated with financial statements to give a true and fair view under ISRS 4410. If there's inadequate provision or if there's inadequate disclosure, are the financial statements, are they appropriate? And if we're looking here, just some other considerations, if we're looking here at an audit file, well, ISA 250 kicks in, the file needs to reflect the considerations. And irrespective of whether you're doing an audit or irrespective of whether you're doing an accounts compilation, we need to get bespoke representations here. And, look at minutes of meetings, third-party expert reports. To ensure the financial statements give a true and fair view. KPM have highlighted an issue that has been bubbling under the surface for years. They've now brought it out in the open. And this has an impact. Watch your property management companies. Watch whether you're an accountant or a compiling accountant or whether you are an auditor. Oh, here's one other consideration. Be very, very careful if you are or have gone on as a director on one of these companies. Okay, so we're running a webinar on property management companies and on this topic. I just grabbed the date here. I really should have had that in front of me before I did. So the webinar is running on the 22nd of May 2019, and the webinar is called Property Management Company Issues in 2019. So if any of this query impacts on you and your business, please go to cpdstore.com and you can book or click on the link below to book your place. Now, this is just one of our queries of the week that forms part of Knowledge Hub. So if you're watching this query anywhere else other than on Knowledge Hub, please go on over to knowledgehub.omnipro.ie. So basically the omnipro.ie address with Knowledge Hub stuck in, and in there you can see this query of the week and other queries of the week. Maybe you might even leave a suggestion for our question for next week.